I'm J.E. Wilds, a hunting guide that lives down in the pristine landscapes of New Zealand. Join my team and I on our dream hunts as we hunt the wild places our wilderness has to offer. Welcome to the J.E. Wilds podcast. Alright guys, just a little disclaimer. I'm currently sitting underneath a little fly shelter that I've put up in amongst some scrub up on a mountain. It's drizzling. You might be able to hear the rain off and on in the background. It's a little bit windy, but we're sort of tucked away in a nice patch of scrub overlooking the most amazing freaking valley you've ever seen in your life. It's a place that I have actually started to really, really like. This is an amazing spot. I'm sipping a coffee, so I might have the odd break here and there, but you know, don't hate me for it, guys. Got a nice warm coffee. The time is 11:24. So yeah, I'm going to tell you about this trip that I'm currently on. So it's April. It's now mid-April, and I am now 6 days, I believe, 6 days deep into a trip. I wasn't going to film this podcast until I got out, back home, back to the office, but I've got some time to burn right now. I'm just waiting on this front to go past, the storm front. Can you hear that wind? There's some exciting stuff. I've got some really cool stuff just below me I'll tell you about shortly, but we're going to start off at the start. Okay, right, I'll get into it. I'll try and remember everything in detail as per always, guys. But so after the last trip, which you would have heard the previous podcasts to this one, I made my way up to Canterbury. The plan was to head to Scott Rogers' place, a good friend of mine, and he's up in Methven. So the plan was to stay a couple of days with Scott and Caroline. Yeah, we're just going to hang out and just going to rest up, relax a little bit, do some emails and all that sort of carry on. But we were also going to do a hunt. So when I got up there, the weather had come in, it was pretty bad. So I was hoping to fly out the following day after arriving at Scott's, but literally it was clagged in. The fog was so low, the cloud was so low, we could only see 200-300 metres from his house. And he's way out in the flats, he's nowhere near the mountains. So there was no chance of flying on the Thursday that was. So anyway, it was just a day kicking around, hanging out. I got to have a look at Scott's new hangar. So Scott has, him and Caroline have a business, Heli Rural Methven. Well, Heli Rural, and it's a helicopter business that they do hunting, they do ag work, they do scenic tours, all sorts of stuff. And as you know, you would have heard me talk about Scott before. I've flown with Scott a lot over the years. He used to be the base manager for Haast Heli Services over on the west coast. And but yeah, him and Caroline have started up their own sort of venture, so Heli Rural, and they service the Canterbury region, which is very cool, very, very cool. Anyway, I'm staying with Scott and Caroline, and we're just hanging out, and they've just built a new hangar, so they've added another hangar onto their original base, so now they've got two hangars, and I hadn't seen the new one yet, so on a Thursday, on a bad weather day, we ended up going and hanging out in the new hangar, checking it out. Yeah, he's got some heads up on the wall, pretty cool. Tar, chamois, and obviously stags. And it's an awesome building. It's a freaking awesome building. So 2 helicopters in there at the moment. Got the 44, the Robbie, and then got the 500D as well. So they fit in there real comfortably. On the back wall, he's got like big banners of big posters of just photos of all success stories of clients and stuff like that, flying with them. So that's pretty cool to look through. There's a few photos of me and old Flirty and on there, so that's cool. And yeah, just checking out the new hangar. I actually helped out and we gave it a big clean out, big sweep out, and not that it was dirty, but after we'd finished, we had a couple of beers and we just mucked around and the place was looking spotless, so that was very cool. That was the Thursday, and then Thursday night we went and caught up with Steve and Sarah and Jim. So that was real cool. Good friends of Scott and Caroline, and I've become friends with them as well. They're a farming family, and they own the land that Heli Rural leases for their heli base. So anyway, really good family, hardcore hunters. So yeah, many good yarns every time I go and see those guys. So it was awesome to catch up with them. So we had dinner around there. Yeah, it was a good night. A couple of beers and a few yarns and all that sort of stuff. Steve and Sophie, their daughter, were just leaving the day after to do a big muster, which is pretty cool, like a 5-day muster up in the mountains. So that was exciting to hear about that. They're going to do some hunting while they're up there. Friday, woke up in the morning. Basically, all my stuff was packed and ready to go, but Friday morning there was stool-looking cloud cover. But I went to the base. Scott was already there, and we were just hanging out there, just basically waiting for the cloud to lift up in the mountains so we could get in. There was quite a few parties going in, hunting. Yeah, so I got to meet some good guys. There's 3 different parties. Yeah, 3 different parties in total. Yeah, they're all going in for stags and, a good time. So that was pretty cool to have a yarn to them. Most of them actually watch my videos, so it was pretty cool to have some one-on-one chats to them and, ask them a few questions about what they think of my videos and what they like, what they don't like, all that sort of stuff. So that was cool. Yeah, good bunch of guys. So I'm actually really excited to hear how they got on. They're all hunting different areas, obviously, but there was a party of 4, and then there was 2 other parties as well, and they're all going their separate ways. So it'd be really interesting to hear how they got on. So if you're listening to this, guys, hopefully, I suppose by the time this podcast is out, I would have heard the details. Scott would have told me, and hopefully I would have got some photos sent through to Instagram by you guys. j.e.wilds is my Instagram if anyone wants to know it. So yeah, we're hanging out, waiting for the cloud to clear, and I think it was probably, Scott was adamant that 11 a.m. it was going to be clear enough to fly, going by his forecasts. We were sort of counting on that, and it's weird, but sure enough, 11 a.m. comes around and we can fly. We can finally see the mountains. So off we go. Scott takes a load in with half the party of 4, and then on the return trip picks up the other 2 guys and me. We on the way in we drop the other 2 guys with the first flight guys. Yeah, they were setting up a base camp down on a nice sort of plateau in some scrub country and nice rolling hills, and yeah, good little spot. And then we carried on further deeper into the mountains. So me and Scott have been looking at a few maps, and this particular area that I was going to, I'd never been to before, and Scott had said that it could be a tucked away little posse, because it's not really, how do I put it? There's a series of real scrubby, gnarly, gorgy faces that has heaps of cover, and potentially they don't get hunted that much, just for where they are, So the plan was we were going to go there, and I was going to hunt these faces, hunt this area, and just see what's around. And it'll be like an exploration trip for me and Scott, really. But we're just going to see what happens, and if there wasn't anything that I particularly liked, or if there wasn't any animals that I was keen to target in there, then I was just going to en route Scott and get shifted in a few days' time. Somewhere where there's a lot more cover and stuff. So anyway, we get dropped off. I think I'm getting dropped off at 1280 elevation, I believe, and just on a nice sort of tussock. It was kind of like a little bit of a gut that runs up to a point, but it was flat enough to land. So we land in there. I see Scott off. He flies off. He obviously going back to grab the other guys and take them in. So I set up my camp. I tuck it away in this. It's like a little flat bench in amongst the tussock. I can just see some amazing country all around me, like a very good view. Set up the camp. I only took I took my main pack, my F1 Everly stock frame with the Vapor. So the plan was to keep as mobile as possible. So if I want to shift camp, I can. I'm not carrying around frickin' chili bims and seats and, all that unnecessary stuff, or the luxury stuff, I should say. So I had one bag with me, so camp was pretty easy. I just set up my tent, which was the Hubba 2-person, the one I normally take when I am staying mobile. Set up camp, done, got that all ready. At this stage, it was probably midday-ish, 12:30, and I was sort of setting up for the late arvo evening hunt, and I was just going to hunt the the faces that were right, sort of within 50 metres to 70 metres from camp, I could get to a vantage point which overlooked some really good faces. So that was the plan for the evening. So yeah, come evening I creeped my way up there, got all my bits and pieces with me, rifle and everything just in case, and I set up in these rocks, and from there I could see, I don't know how far I could see, but I could see huge distances. I could see some incredible looking country. So I'm sort of posted there, and it wasn't until, I don't know, it must have been, I think it gets dark about 6:30 p.m, but it was probably around 5 o'clock, I'd say, round about then. I looked directly across the valley from me, and there was three chamois, in their summer coats, and they were just working this sort of bit of a scree slip, and there was like a little island of tussock and trees and things like that. They were just feeding through that, throughout that sort of stuff. So I just watched them, pretty cool. It was a doe and her young one, which is 6 months old, 7 months old, something like that. And then it looked like there was a young buck, potentially her kid from the previous year. Well, I got that impression anyway, might not be, but that's the impression I got. So 3 of them, and they were just cruising their way through. So I was looking, this is directly across the valley, but on my side of the valley below me, I'm looking down into all these craggy bluffs with scrub and just real gnarly tiger country. So I can see down into that, and I think it would have been around 6 o'clock, I saw on a ridge maybe 200 to 250 metres away from me, the chamois just walks up onto it, and it's standing there, it's all lit up in the sun, like the last little bit of sun, and it was amazing. I got the camera on it, filmed it for a bit, and it was standing there, and it ended up bedding down right there in plain view. So that was cool. Close range. It was a doe, and she seemed to be by herself from what I could see. So I was watching that, and then shortly after that I noticed directly past it, so same line but past it, on this really big face that was, I don't know, this face I'm talking about now it's flat onto me, so I can see a huge amount of it. I can see a lot of it. I can see up the guts and up in all the crags and stuff like that, and I was looking up in there and I saw 3 more chamois just feeding their way through. Sort of a similar situation. It looked like a doe and a young one, and then another younger animal, not a kid or anything, but still young. I couldn't tell if it was a buck or not from where I was, but yeah, so they were feeding their way through, and this other one was bedded in between us, and yeah, it's pretty cool, like straight away into chamois. Oh, that wind's blowing. Yeah, so that was a pretty good first impression of the spot. Good chamois numbers from what I can see. So yeah, I was just enjoying watching those, and the sun had just started going behind the mountains, and there was no longer these big golden rays coming through. It was starting to get that blue colour. Everything's sort of that twilight look. I end up seeing, what did I see after that? Directly below me, and I ranged it, I think it was 200 metres, but directly below me, like right below me, there was another chamois, and it was feeding out in the tussock and in amongst like a bit of a rocky garden type thing. So I filmed that guy. I think it was a young buck. I didn't put a spotting scope on it, but from what I could tell with the binos and stuff, looked like a young buck. And yeah, so that was cool. That just made its way towards the bedded one, so it's heading around to our right, which is in the direction of the bedded one. I think for the evening, after glassing huge amounts of country, I didn't see anything else, but I was stoked. I went in there looking for stags and fallow bucks, and I did have a thought that if I saw a good chamois buck, I would probably set up on it. So it was cool to see something. I went to bed that night and had a pretty good sleep. The tent was on a bit of a lean because it wasn't ideally flat, but I kept sliding down into the bottom end of the tent, which was kind of a pain in the ass, but that's just what happens. Yeah, it was a good sleep. I woke up pretty early in the morning, and I went back up to that same spot. I nestled in there just on daylight, Yeah, what did I see? I didn't see anything on my side, but I saw a mob of 8 chamois across the valley where I'd seen the first 3, so directly across the valley from me, and they were moving their way up the face, and they got onto the, the peak of that sort of valley mountain, which is, trying to explain it, not doing a very good job, but directly opposite me on the face, they were up on the peak of that. So yeah, there was 8 of them, all in a line, just marching along. So I filmed them, watched them disappear over the top, and then shortly after that, I saw another 2 chamois, a doe and a young one, on that same face, but down lower in this really nice looking valley that ran up in amongst that face I'm just talking about. And then I changed positions. I went to the left hand side. I peeled down about 300 metres, got to another vantage point and looked down the valley, and where I couldn't quite see from that first spot. And pretty well straight away I picked up 2 pigs, 2 blue pigs, so the bluey silver colour, a sow and a young one, just mooching their way through, looked like a swampy little gutter. Yeah, it was cool. First pigs. I'd seen a lot of pig rooting on the other faces, a lot of pig sign, but first I'd actually seen in there. So I watched them for a while, got a bit of video, and then I ended up going back to camp at lunchtime when that sun, oh, by the way, it is blue sky, not a cloud in the sky, and it is roasting hot during the middle of the day. So I actually went back to camp. I just had a little lay down for 2 or 3 hours. Yeah, just tried to keep out of that sun. Like it was harsh enough that I was starting to get sunburnt, which wasn't good. Yeah, waited till that sort of arvo evening again, and then I started making my way up the ridge. So this time I'm planning to go further afield and check out the next valley over where I had the close chamois bedded, and then there's that face that directly is flat onto me. I wanted to get onto the top of that face and look over the back of that. On my way up there, I was glassing all over the place. Yeah, I'm out to the right hand side, and these huge big tussock fingers, I spotted a deer. I thought it was a stag to start because I couldn't see its neck or its head. I could just see its sort of like body poking out from behind some tussock. Anyway, I watched it for quite a while. I sat down in the tussock, and if you don't know what tussock is, it's like a real tall, grassy, brown coloured bush. It's like long blades of grass almost, and the hillsides are just covered in them. They make up the entire floor of the hill. So they can be really tall in some places. So it can be waist high or sometimes even higher. But where this deer was, in parts, basically concealed by it. It was that tall. Anyway, I sat down and I watched for ages because I was thinking, there's got to be a stag here somewhere. There's got to be one. Nothing. No stags. I didn't see anything. I was half expecting to just see antlers poking out of the tussock, but 300 metres down below at the bottom of the fingers, the tussock fingers were joined into a creek. I could see a big brown wallow, stag wallow. It didn't look like it had been used that recently, but maybe a couple of weeks it had been, 10 days maybe. Yeah, there'd obviously been a stag somewhere in the area, so I was really hopeful that I was going to see one walk out, and especially this time of year, But unfortunately, nothing. So I carried on up to the next vantage point that I wanted to get to. I got up there and I wasn't sure what to expect over the other side. I thought it was going to be good, but I didn't know how good, and I didn't know what I was actually going to be looking at. So when I got up there, I was blown away, man. Like, it looks unreal. Picture a valley that runs from left to right out of the main creek down the bottom, which is down on the left hand side. The main creek joins to this valley, and this valley runs up, and this valley's like flat bottomed, and it's got 2 sides to it, but you can see the entire thing, and it runs up all the way up into bush and scrub and scree and rock face, and just real gnarly country, but lots of cover. The ideal spot where you'd expect to find tar, chamois, and then some of the patches of bush up there. I would pick that a big old stag would tuck himself in there. So I thought, we're definitely going to see something from here tonight, 100%. And I got myself comfortable, sat down and glassed and glassed and glassed and glassed and glassed, and saw nothing. I saw nothing, man. I could not believe it. I'm looking up into here, but then also in the far distance, I can see for like kilometres, and I can glass it all. And if there was a deer out there, there's a high chance I would have seen it. That's how, how much time and how focused I was on scanning the area. I didn't see any more chamois. I did see some pigs, actually. A couple of pigs moving their way through the tussock. You can only just see them every now and again, but yeah, that was pretty cool. So that was the only thing I saw for that night. I got back to camp after dark, and I ended up taking some astro shots of the tent, which was pretty cool. They turned out all right. Yeah, I went to bed. I was sort of thinking like, man, I was expecting to see more deer up here. It was reasonably high elevation for them this time of the year, but they're there. They got to be there. I've seen one, so it's just a matter of picking the right gully, where they're tucked away in. So the next morning I woke up, basically, to cut a long story short, I hunted, I walked, I covered some country, I scouted around, looked into new areas, amazing areas, and I didn't pick up anything else apart from more chamois and more pigs. No bucks yet either, no big bucks anyway, no shooter bucks, so nothing to get me excited on as far as big bucks chamois. I moved camp twice. I really covered the country, and I covered all the faces and everything where I expected I'd find something. So yeah, it's just unfortunate. I'm not sure in two minds whether someone had recently gone in there. I know Scott had dropped huntering further up the valley, like quite away from me, and he got a stag, but it was almost like someone had hunted through where I'd just been, but you never know, and it's big country. You should still be able to pick up animals, but I will admit I was feeling a little bit gutted. I was feeling, if I was looking for chamois, I'd be stoked, but I'm actually looking for roaring stags and croaking fallow bucks, so I was a little bit gutted. But that was the original plan, just to check it out, see what it's like, and then organise a shift later on. So that comes to the shift. So I end up messaging Scott and seeing when he was flying next, and he was due to pick up the other hunters that he dropped in the same day as me, pick them up, take them out. So what the plan was is I was to have all my camp packed up, and while he's coming in to get them, he was going to swing by, grab me, and drop me off in a new catchment, new area, just completely new terrain, and see what I can find there. So it worked out pretty good. He had, 6 hunters to pull out, and he just swung up and grabbed me as well. It worked out pretty good in that regards. So yeah, about 3 o'clock comes around, and I hear the 500 coming up the valley. Scott lands next to me. I jump in, and he was pretty excited to hear about all the chamois, and that was sort of like the exploration mission, done and dusted. I don't regret it, it was good, but I was ideally looking for stags, as you know, so the next plan was to go somewhere that's got more bush, more cover, maybe a little lower down elevation wise, and hopefully just a higher deer concentration. So there's a couple of spots we had in mind. One of them was another. Well, it was an easy one to get to for Scott, and I've never been into it, so it was quite exciting to potentially go into this spot. So anyway, we talked about it on the flight, and Scott said, let's just do it, let's see what happens. So he had a little posse where he wanted to drop me, and we ended up landing up on this little plateau that's at the base of quite a nice valley that runs off the main river. And the valley's, paint a picture in your mind of what the valley looks like. It's at the base here where I got dropped off. It's 900 metres elevation, and it probably climbs up to, I'm just looking up the top now, probably, it's got to be up there. I reckon it's way higher than, I reckon it's probably 1800, maybe more. So yeah, it climbs up to some fairly high peaks back there. The valley's pretty steep. It's, at my end, it's really rocky, but there's big patches of bush, like beech forest. There's scrub faces, there's real tight scrubby gullies, there's cover. There is cover everywhere. And then obviously it breaks out into more open tussock country as you get higher up the sides. But instantly it's looking good. Instantly it's looking like the country that I want to be focusing on at this time of the year, with the goal in mind of finding a big stag or something. So we land. I got Scott to bring out some water, so I didn't have to go down low to pick up some more water out of the creek. So he brought me in some water, which was kind of him. Saves me a hike. And anyway, he drops me off and good luck and all that sort of stuff. And he carried on ferrying his hunters out. And I set up camp, and it's probably about 4:30 at this stage. Camp's all set up and in amongst some matagari, which is like a spiky plant. So I had to make sure that there was no matagari on the floor underneath my tent that was going to poke through and pop my air mattress, because that would not be the first, but it's never a freaking good thing. Yeah, so that evening I sort of thought, man, what are we going to see, New area, it feels like I've been refreshed. What are we going to see? I remember once camp was all organised, I packed up my hunting gear and I just walked, 30 metres from camp where I could look up the valley. Straight away spotted 3 hinds, red hinds. So that was a cool start. So I watched them, they were just feeding their way out of the valley bottom, out of the bush, coming out into the open country, just picking their way through the tussock. Watched them for quite a while, and then I looked across the valley from me on the opposite side, and there was 2 more. And they were doing a similar thing, just feeding their way through the open country, out of the thick cover. So yeah, that was a good start. I was pretty excited to see deer, to be honest. Pretty excited to see deer. So then I ended up going up to just above camp. There's a high point. It looks over the other side of the valley. So out of the valley I'm in into the next valley. I thought I'll go up there and I'll look down there first, because the wind is actually good for there, really good for there. It looks up the main river. It looks up these really good faces, and I thought let's sit there till evening, till dark. We'll just see what comes out. So I get set up there. I'm crouching amongst these rocks, and I've got a real good vantage point. I could probably see, imagine where I'm sitting. Directly ahead of me is probably 600 metres of view of faces, so clear, scrubby faces. And below the faces is thick bush, and the thick bush runs all the way down to the river bottom, and I can see the river bottom. So I'm basically looking, where I'm focusing on is this clear, scrubby area above the main bush. And I was hoping that the deer, as the evening sets in, the deer were going to make their way out of that main bush and come up into this sort of scrubby, broken, open country and start feeding. That was the plan. So I set myself up, I got real comfortable and just waited. Sure enough, a stag come out. Looked like a 3-year-old stag. Probably, I didn't count his points, but I got some, I did get some video of him. 8 or 10 points maybe. He just moved his way through. You could tell he was on a mission. So I watched him disappear into all the scrub. And then shortly after that, 2 hinds, hind and her young one come out, and they were feeding their way up the face. Shortly after that, and this is just getting darker and darker, it's probably 5:30 now, I had 3 more hinds come out. So now there's, 6 deer that I've seen so far, and these 3 hinds are just doing the same thing, feeding their way out of the thick cover out onto the edge of the open country. So I'm filming them and just watching them and pretty excited. I looked directly below me about 6 o'clock, so I got about half an hour of decent light left. Directly below me I could see a brown patch coming up through the scrub, maybe 150 metres below me. So I got the binos on it, and I could see a deer's back, and it was just pushing its way through the tight scrub. So I was watching it, and then it puts its head up, and it's a stag. I was thinking, oh crap, here we go. Like trying to get a look at how old he was, how good he was. It was making it real difficult. He was ducking, he was feeding his way up, so his head was up and down, up and down, up and down. And by the time I got to see his body in full and his head in full, I could tell he was just a young fella, sort of around that 2 to 3 year old mark. I think he was an 8-pointer. And yeah, he was just feeding his way up out of the scrub, coming right up below me, like heading right for me. He wouldn't have got to me because there's a rocky bluff below me, but he was heading right for me, which was very cool. I got some cool footage of him. And then, so that was my evening. I was sort of just watching these deer milling around. It was starting to get dark at this point, and I was thinking, this stag below me, he's actually going to keep coming up and up, and eventually he's going to make it difficult for me to get back to camp, because he's only going to be 40 50 metres from where I'm going to walk, and I thought I'd hate to blow him out of there and sort of disrupt the area. Maybe I'm better off to sneak out now while he's down a bit lower and get back to camp and look back into the main camp valley again while I've got just 10-15 minutes of light. So that was what I did. I packed up and I was just starting to walk, and then I heard down in the valley below, and there was a fallow buck rutting away, croaking, making all sorts of racket. It was cool to hear. It was very cool. So I actually paused and I had a glass down there. I couldn't see him. He was obviously in the bush, but I could hear him croaking away. Surprise. Very surprised, but very stoked to hear it. Yeah, so I carried on going. I got back to camp without spooking that stag out of there. All the other deer were feeding. They had no idea I was there. Yeah, I looked down into the main camp valley, and across the face there was a few deer just kicking around. I could just make them out in the faint light, but yeah, I couldn't really see them that well. So then I thought, oh well, now's a good chance to sneak into bed and try get some dinner in me and have a good rest. So I ended up getting tea on the go. What did I have for dinner? I had a basil pesto. I haven't tried this one before. It's from Radix. It was pretty good. So I had that and I had a cup of soup, and that was enough for me. Yeah, I went to bed. Yeah, I thought I could hear some roars, but it was starting to get a little bit windy. So I wasn't sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was hearing them or just my mind was hoping to hear them. So anyway, I went to sleep and I woke up at midnight, and my tent was trying to blow away on me. It was freaking, the wind had got up and it was whipping in there. My tent, it's probably the windiest I've ever been in a tent. On the big gusts, I could hear them rushing down the valley. I could hear them coming. So I'd put my hand up and I'd brace the top of the tent. The wind would hit the tent, and if my hand wasn't there, the tent would bend down towards my face, like it would flatten it and spring back up. And it takes a decent amount to push these tents around, but the wind was howling, man. It was like, I was thinking, sheesh, am I gonna, how's this night gonna go? Is it gonna snap my poles? What's gonna happen? Is it gonna blow the tent off the mountain? Anyway, so yeah, I got a real crap sleep, last night. Real crap. Most of the night I just couldn't get to sleep because the wind would ease off and I'd slowly drift off, and then it would pick back up again and I'd have to brace it again, and yeah, it was nuts. It was a crazy night, man. It was a crazy night. But eventually the morning rolls around. It was 6 o'clock, my alarm went off, and still dark at this point, so I was feeling tired, man. I'm not going to lie about it. I was feeling freaking tired. But I eventually rolled out of bed, I think about 20 past 6, got my stuff, and I walked. I didn't go far from camp, but I walked to a vantage point where I can look up the main valley that the camp's in, and where I'd seen a deer just on dark, the last deer I'd seen the night before. I set up and started looking just as it was coming light, and straight across the valley from me there was a hind and a young one bedded, like a little patch of grass in amongst the scrub. So if you were on the face you wouldn't see her, but it was just because I was on the opposite face looking in, I could see her. It was a cool little spot. So I was watching her for a bit. There was 2 more deer above her, and it looked like 2 hinds, sort of mature hinds. Hang on, what's that? Oh, I just heard something over there. Yes, I was watching them. And then out to the right, so still on the opposite side of the face, but further to the right, in the main bush, there's a few big clearings and open patches, and I caught a glimpse of another hind, so I put the binos on it, and there was 2 of them there. So I was watching them for a bit, and then out of nowhere, the stag walks into view. Just gave me a real brief glimpse of him. Didn't get to see how old or antler size or anything like that. I could just tell it was a stag. He went behind some trees. Another hind walks out, it seemed like that's what he was after. He was after this one particular hind. So I watched her for ages, and she was in the bush, and then she eventually moved away into the open patch where the 2 original ones were. And she's standing there feeding away and stuff, and then I could see him coming through the bush. So I got the camera on him and started filming him. He walks out into this open patch, he roars, and yeah, it looked like a nice stag. Not really what I'm looking for. A little young, and I didn't put the spotting scope on him, so I couldn't see how many points, but probably like 10 points, maybe 12, something like that. But yeah, maybe another year or 2 and he'd be a sort of stag that I'd be looking for personally. But it was quite cool to see him rutting. roaring and sniffing around after this hind and, putting on a good show. So I watched him for a little while, and then I heard a roar up the valley, so way out to my left. I turned around, and I got a glimpse of a stag, like way off, maybe 800 metres on his face, just above the bush edge. And I put the binos on him, and through the binos, it looked like a decent animal. He was dark mane, dark body, and really dark antlers. So I got the camera on him, and I went and got my spotting scope out of my bag and put that on the tripod and zoomed in on him. And he was a nice stag, man. Like, he was a nice looking stag, and he was there, and he was roaring. I watched him roar a couple of times, and he was just looking down the valley, and he was just, he looked cool. I think he was a big 10, but he was still young for what I'm looking for. Really dark antlers, really nice shape to him, amazing shape to him. Pretty sure he was a 10. I'll have to have a look at the video footage when I get back, but I watched him for quite a while, and he was just standing there, and he'd roar, and then he'd look down the valley, and he'd look up the valley, and he kept looking up, like towards me, but up to his right, which is up to my left, like on the same side of me. It's like he was watching something up there, and he was roaring, and then he'd like stare up there. So I was wondering if there was more deer over the top of the ridge where I couldn't see. There's like a spur that run down in between me and him, and he was looking up that, on the other side of that spur, up that gully where I couldn't quite see. So yeah, I kept watching, and then eventually on the top of that spur, I catch a bit of movement, and this is probably 400 metres away, and there's a stag walking up there. So that must have been what he was looking at. He was looking up the valley at another stag. They were probably roaring backwards and forth to each other. So I got the binos on this guy and camera on him, and he was an older animal. He was the sort of age class I'm looking for. Big body, big neck on him, just a cool looking animal. And he had snapped his antler off at just above the brow tine. So he'd snapped it off at the main beam, just clean, straight, broken off. His good antler was pretty long, like big beam length, and I think 5 points on that antler. So if his other antler was similar, it'd be a big 10, but he was mature, and he's the sort of animal I'm looking for. If he had both his antlers, there's a high chance I would have tried to make a move on him. So he was obviously must have been fighting recently and just snapped it off. So yeah, it was pretty cool. He started sort of feeding and walking his way towards me, and in between me and him on our side of the valley, there's this big patch of beech, which is a big forest area, so a beech tree. So there's a big grove of beech trees. In New Zealand, we call it a big patch of beech forest. So he was walking his way towards that, and I thought, I wonder if he's going to go into that beech patch and bed down for the day. At this stage, it's probably 8:30 in the morning. Yeah, I watched him walk all the way in, pretty close, like 350 metres from me at this stage, and disappear into the edge of the beach. And I was watching over there, and I was like, he's either going to go in there and bed down, or he's going to follow the edge of the beach down and do like a big circuit of this amazing big bowl that I'm looking into on my side of the valley, big basin. Imagine that. I thought, imagine if he does that. That would be cool. But most likely he's going to go and bed down in that beach. Yeah, it's probably like 10 minutes later. I looked down in the bowl, and there was this spur that ran down in the centre of the bowl that sort of broke it in half almost. It was only quite a low spur, and the beach was on the top of it. It worked its way down into this open bowl surrounded by beach. And I looked on the spur, and there he is. He's standing there, and he's looking around, and he starts walking his way down the spur. So I get it on film, and he's like patrolling his way down, and he gets right down into the bottom of this bowl, which the bottom of this bowl is amazing. Like, it reminds me of North America, kind of, that big forest and big open meadows and stuff like that. And he's walking through there, and he's roaring, he's looking around, and feeding and doing all sorts of stuff. And he ended up moving through this basin, like doing big loops of it. And he, I wonder if a couple of weeks ago, I wonder if he was dominant and holding hinds in this area, and he sort of claimed it as his own territory or something, because he was walking around like he was the kingpin of it. And I watched him move his way up to the other side of the bowl, and he got to the top of this little high point, and he bedded down. So he bedded down right on the edge of this little patch of beach, and he's just looking down into the basin, like looking down towards my direction. At the closest he got to me, he would have been 200 metres, I'd say. I actually ranged him at one point, he was 330, and he got closer than that as he was roaring his way down the valley. So that was cool. Yeah, he's just bedded there. The other stag, the dark timbered stag, I don't know where he went. He disappeared while I was watching this guy, but he either, he most likely just dropped into the beach below where he was, I'd say. I sort of thought, this is cool, so I was watching the big old stag bedded, and then we're due to get some rain today, and I was wondering how long it was going to take for it to turn up, and it just started to spit, so I set up a fly. So I pulled the fly out of my bag right here where I'm sitting. I put the fly above me and I got my cooker out and made myself some coffee, made myself some breakfast. Yeah, I'm just sitting here enjoying the valley. So the stag is still bedded there right now. Like if I stand up, I'll see him. He's still down on that face, bedded there. He's just shifted about 40 metres, but he's still there. So that's kind of where we are, guys. That's the rundown of this hunt so far. So the plan is I'm looking for a big stag, old stag. Doesn't have to be a giant antlered stag, just an old nice looking stag. Potentially a fallow buck. I'd love to put a stalk on a big fallow buck. But yeah, we've got a good evening hunt coming up. And I think what I'll do is there'll be a part 2 to this podcast, which will carry on from this moment here. So if you like this, guys, tune back in for part 2. Starting off this evening, carrying on from right here, right now. See you then.